One of the most important findings in relationship research is that healthy couples are not healthy because they never have negative moments. In Gottman's work, stable, happy couples were often described as having about 5 positive interactions for every 1 negative interaction during conflict. And to me, the important part is this. Healthy relationships are not rupture free. In other words, they're not just disconnection or fight free. They are instead what I like to call repair rich. The goal is not to never misunderstand each other, never get activated, never say the wrong thing, never miss each other, never say what you wish you could take back. But the goal is to know how to come back together because a rupture does not automatically destroy safety. But an unrepaired rupture, on the other hand, teaches our nervous system this is not safe to return to. Can you imagine? Our nervous system with one another is not safe to return to. That's what it teaches.
Hey there, Evolver. If you have found this channel, you're probably someone who thinks deeply about life, growth, and the human mind. My name is Amelia, and this is a channel where we explore the psychology, neuroscience, and lived experience of what it actually means to evolve as a human being.
In my work with individuals, couples, and leaders, this is one of the biggest misunderstandings I see around healthy relationships time and time again. People think that the healthiest relationships are the ones that, well, let's just think about it, where there is no conflict and no fighting. But it couldn't be the opposite of that. It's, the thought is, well, there's no tension, there's no misattunement, there's no disappointment, there's never a hard conversation. But honestly, that's just not realistic. And from my perspective, it is not even the highest goal one could kind of aspire towards, because real intimacy at its depths requires two people to bring more of their truth into the room, not less. And once their truth is in this room with one another, there will be those moments where something ends up being said wrong. It lands wrong. A tone feels sharp. A need feels completely missed and just right over someone's head. A boundary itself feels threatening because of the way maybe it was delivered, right? A vulnerability feels mishandled. A repair attempt, it gets rejected. Why? Well, because one person is still, in fact, activated. That does not mean, though, the relationship itself is unhealthy. It means that the relationship needs repair. In the last video, we talked about a couple of things. First and foremost, we talked about emotional intimacy. And secondly, we talked about reciprocal disclosure. The idea that intimacy builds through gradual, mutually revealing aspects. It's kind of like a dance, I said. But the deeper that people go, what happens there? The more tender the material that we share and reveal it comes. Our needs, our fears, shame, boundaries, the identities that we have and struggle with, the shame that comes as a result of that, old wounds, things that maybe we have left in the closet, good old skeleton in the closet stuff. And the more tender that the material is that is revealed about ourselves, the more important that repair as a skill handled with care ultimately becomes. And because the reality is when someone lets you see something real inside of them, and that real thing gets super misunderstood, it gets dismissed, or it gets rushed, or even, been here, mishandled, the nervous system, it remembers. So this episode is all about what happens after that moment of disconnection. How do we come back? How do we repair? And ultimately, how do we restore safety without pretending nothing happened? Because a rupture is a moment of disconnection. It is that literal moment, picture this, you two are connected, and then there's disconnect. That is a relationship rupture. And it might be obvious, right? It might be obvious in a fight that happens, a conflict. Maybe you raise your voice for the first time and it was below or way above the threshold that you usually raise it to. It might have been a hurtful comment, a defensive response. Maybe you used what we call at the Conscious Couples podcast, red button language, maybe a threat, an ultimatum, or it might be subtle, a missed bid for connection, a moment of emotional absence. You're on your phone and your partner is saying something really important, and then they walk away. Maybe it's a joke that lands pitifully. Been there. Or maybe a vulnerable share that gets met with problem solving instead of what your partner really needed or that person really needed in that moment, which was presence. Repair is the movement back towards connection, not necessarily resolution. And it always doesn't mean we agree. Matter of fact, repair can happen as you don't agree. Instead, it means I care that something happened between us, and I'm willing to come back to it with you. This happens more than we as human beings would like to admit, and a lot of us actually miss those small moments to repair. And it's those small moments, the small misses, that start to break down relationships. And I want to give this example I have in front of me, my remarkable, a couple of names. You know, I want us all thinking about the example in maybe a family setting. Someone shares something really vulnerable. Maybe they say to, let's say, their sibling, I've been feeling really overwhelmed lately. And the other person immediately responds with advice. As an older sister, I've gone there way more times than I would like to admit. Let's say, for example, that sibling says, well, have you tried organizing your schedule better? Have you tried maybe thinking about getting up earlier, or this or that? The advice itself might be well-intentioned, and more often than not, it is. But the person who shared may feel completely and utterly missed. Not because that advice was evil, not because it was even remotely within a Hail Mary's distance around what is realistically possible and necessary, maybe if it was a problem-solving conversation, but because the need in that moment was not strategy. It was, in fact, presence. And that was totally missed. A repair in that moment might sound like something of the sorts of, hey, I realized I moved into problem solver or fixing, that tendency that I have when you were probably looking for me to understand. Can I try that again? Whew. One sentence totally changes the emotional meaning of the moment between two human beings trying to be humans. And that's the thing about repair. It often starts when someone can name the impact without defending the intention. The intention may have been good, and more often than not, we're human beings. We have good intentions, and the good intentions are just half of it, right? Because the good intentions are there. But repair cares about what actually happened in that connection. In other words, the impact, not just the intention. And when this started shifting inside of me, owning the impact, not just the intention, it really started to have me even looking at relationships differently. Another example is where conflict has this escalation. It starts as something that baseline seems insignificant. But as I look at the person that is maybe a friend, you picture two people just talking about something important to them. Maybe it's I don't know, their favorite sports game. Maybe it's talking about something that they're really contemplating in terms of maybe a career change. They're both talking about something important, but one person, they feel criticized for whatever reason, and then the other person feels unheard. Then what happens? The conversation starts to speed up. The tone gets sharper. Bodies get tighter. Both people start now all of a sudden defending why they want to make the decisions that they do in their careers, why they want to jump for that promotion, why they're ducking responsibility because their team project didn't go as well as they had hoped. At the end of the day, what ends up happening is no one is listening to anyone anymore, not even each other. And so at that point, the repair might not be a better argument of who can win that escalation that's happening. It may simply be who can regulate first. Something like, hey, hold on, time out. I think we're honestly both too activated to do this well right now, to have this conversation. I hear that this is super important to you, and I want to make sure that I come back to this with you, but I need to pause first. Cue the sipping of your tea or your coffee or whatever that is. That is not avoidance if there is, in fact, a return. And that last part really does matter, because at the end of the day, most people never return to those moments. A pause without a return, that in our nervous systems can feel like abandonment, and it does. A pause with returning back to that moment actually becomes repair. So think about that friend, and think about them pausing, and think about them taking a moment and they sip their tea, or they take a breather, they go to the bathroom, and then they come back and they sit down and they say that, and they say, okay, so where were we? But it's from a regulated state. That's going to go so much better than just constantly escalating. Example number 3, I want you to picture the leader, the new and budding leader in her new role. She's not a net new leader, but she is newer to the specific promotion that she just got. Maybe she just got a new team, and that team just acquired a department that was honestly kind of hung out to dry. This leader, let's say she was in a team meeting. I have a client that's coming to mind right now. This is what happened in real time. She's telling me the story. And what did she do? She gave feedback quickly in one meeting. And maybe the feedback was valid. And in her case, this client's case, it was extremely valid. But the delivery that she had, that was way too sharp. And too sharp for her team, that new team that she had. So the team members that received that, what do they do instead of speaking up and really sharing and absorbing what she was saying? Instead, a team member goes quiet. The room shifts and everyone moves, and they move on, because technically the point that she made was in fact made. But relationally, when we think about under the surface, something else happened. And that something else was a rupture. But she is prone to understanding her sharp delivery. She's been well versed in understanding how that sharpness of her tone, delivering a point, that direct communication, how that impacts people. So repair for her might sound like something of the sort. When she notices that room shift, she says, hey, I want to come back to something. Let's say she's talking to that team member in the hallway, and she says, my feedback earlier when I delivered that may have came across sharper than I originally intended. The standards still matter, but I want to own the delivery, and I want to own the impact and how that might have came off. Can you imagine a leader saying that knowing the impact, seeing the shift, seeing the signals. That is leadership. That's not pretending. Let's not pretend the rupture did not happen. Let's not sweep it underneath the rug. Let's not over apologize until a standard, in fact, itself disappears. But instead, she repaired the relationship, and specifically that relational field, while also still holding the duality of the truth. Now, that's not easy to do. And if you're a new and budding leader, I would highly recommend learning about what the impact of your style is. I, at first, was not great at this at all. I still always am learning. But that's the thing. We oftentimes, whether you're a leader, or the friend, or the family, we think to ourselves that in some way, shape, or form, repair, in fact, weakens our own authority. So we don't do it. And that shows up pretty much everywhere when you look at relationships. A lot of people will struggle with apologizing. But repair, it actually doesn't weaken your authority. It instead increases trust because it shows that people understand that truth and accountability can actually coexist. And one of my favorite sayings is 2 things can be true at the same time. Truth and accountability, those 2 can coexist. So it might be true that that delivery was sharp. And it's also true that you were delivering a standard that a leader needs to deliver. So let's talk about this from a nervous system standpoint, because everything in EVE always comes back down to that. And from a nervous system perspective, repair it matters ultimately because ruptures, what do? They create uncertainty. When that moment of disconnection happens, we are uncertain when that's going to come back together. So what happens? Our system, what does it do? It's like, I love that analogy of like a radar, sonar radar in the ocean, and like naval ships, for example. There's this scanning for a bleep, bleep, or if you're a fisherman, like the bleep of a fish pinging the system. That's what our nervous system is doing at all times. It's scanning after a rupture, and it's scanning for, are we okay? Am I still safe here? Did I just lose connection with this person? And for how long are we going to be in this disconnected state? Do I need to protect myself right now? Or what do I need to do to prepare for what's going to happen next? And lastly, is this going to happen again? That is happening in so many of our nervous systems when we have ruptures, and ruptures are happening all the time without us really understanding just how often they occur. And if there is no repair, the body often will fill in the blank. And what does that mean, Amelia? Well, it means you might actually start to become guarded. Your body, the nervous system, it starts to become resentful of a relationship. It might stop sharing as much. It might stay agreeable on the outside while ultimately withdrawing on the inside. And that is why repair is not just emotional politeness, my friends. It is nervous system reorientation. Because what it does, it tells our bodies we can come back, we can return, we can come into connection even after that rupture occurs. And what I deeply believe is that we can actually deepen our relational skills when we come to return, when we are rupture rich. That is what I want to get across in this so deeply, because this is also where ultimately a lot of communication advice, from my perspective, stays way too freaking shallow, because it focuses in on what to say during conflicts. And trust me, I can create a whole separate video just with suggestions there. But many relationships are ultimately shaped not just by what we say, by what ultimately happens after the conflict. That is often more of an indicator of how these relationships are shaped. Not necessarily in or during, but after. And hearing that, you might be thinking about your own relationships, the ones that you currently have in your life, the ones that you don't have in your life anymore, how that got carved. It's just like a stone. A stone gets carved after the water runs through it, not during. My science friends, I see you. Because ultimately, we all are shaped by, yes, the word choice, but more often we're shaped by what happens after the conflict. So, what do we do? Do we pretend that nothing happened? Do we punish each other with distance? Do we rush back to normal without meaning making? Do we sweep it underneath the carpet and pretend like nothing happened? Do we make the other person beg for that reconnection to happen? Do we repair in a way that actually restores safety? All of those questions, that aftermath, that matters. And when we think about the aftermath, that is where our nervous systems learn what rupture really means and what that means for us in the aftermath of rupture. And that meaning making usually starts to create beliefs about other people, about our connection to the world at large. And then over time, that slowly starts to seep into our identity, whether we are a good person or are not, whether we are someone who is capable of upholding relationships, whether we are someone who is relationship oriented or not. And repair, it touches our identity levels. Because if you grew up, in fact, in environments where people did not repair, there was not a hyper focus on that. It was not held to the same degree as the conflicts and getting things right in the conflicts. You very likely have learned that conflict, it doesn't just mean danger, but that love also means pretending. You might have also learned that if someone is upset, you have to fix everything immediately. And if you don't, something bad is going to happen. Or maybe you learned that making a mistake, any mistake means inherently that you are bad, you are wrong, you are unlovable, you're unworthy, you're defective. Something is wrong with you at your core, not the mistake behavior. But in a healthier system, what does repair teach us? Repair teaches us something very different. What it actually teaches is the fact that, well, I can make a mistake and I can still return to the connection even after a mistake. It teaches you I can be hurt and still speak, still have a voice that matters. I can be accountable without collapsing into shame. I can be disappointed without disappearing. And I can stay connected without abandoning what is true for me. That is identity level healing. Can you imagine if your relationships encouraged that? What that could do for you? I mean, I am grateful because I'm in a place where that's what my relationships encourage. But I wasn't always there. And so if this is resonating with you and you're recognizing, yeah, healthy relationships, they're repair rich. And honestly, I realize how important this is now. So Amelia, how the heck do I navigate this repair process? Now, trust me, it's not as simple as the 3-step process that I'm going to give you. And I'll just say that bar none. Again, like everything that is so unique and so complex toward the nervous systems and all the layers that are in here, it's not as simple in practice. So if you have messy action and take messy action and it's kind of goopy and gunky and challenging, that's actually a good sign. And you might be like, what do you mean by that? You're giving me a 3-step process and it's going to feel like failure and messy action and not great. What kind of process is that? It's a process that is actually real. It's a process that works. It is a process that helps give you that feedback loop of where you can improve. So do not get discouraged when you start to put this into play. But let's break it down into the simple levels, the simple process that truly, when you kind of look at that 30,000 foot view on what a repair process it really requires, let's break it down into 3. So firstly, step 1. Well, first, when that moment of disconnection happens, what we want to do is we want to name the rupture. Now, if you love this video and you want to understand the different types of rupture, we can do that. And I'll make sure that I create another video for that. But ultimately, we want to just name what happened. We don't want to go into dramatic naming and you did this and this happened and this and that, and not make it a courtroom case. You don't want to do that for sure. But you just want to name it with enough truth to locate the moment. I call it current position. What is the current position that you and your relational partner are in? You can say something in order to name the rupture of something along the lines of, I think that something that I just said landed wrong. Or I noticed we just got both activated. Or, hey, I want to come back to what just happened earlier. Or something, one of my favorites is, I think I missed you in that conversation. I think I missed what I was trying to hear. I think I missed you. I think I missed what you were trying to say there. Naming that rupture, it tells the nervous system, we don't have to pretend in this relationship, and we don't have to just sweep underneath the carpet the things that are very obviously felt in our nervous system. Now, easier said than done. When you can do step 1, let's move to step number 2. Step number 2 is owning your part without erasing theirs. I see you if this is extra hard for you, because if you're an evolver watching this, you're likely someone that usually takes over ownership or more responsibility than maybe is fair. So what we don't want to do is we don't want to erase their part, but we also don't want to over focus on theirs, right? It's kind of like, this is my pie. That is your pie. This is the slice that I contributed and put on the plate, and I'm going to let you take care of yours. I'm not going to pretend like you didn't put a piece of pie on my plate, but this one's mine. And this is important because owning your part without erasing theirs, it showcases that repair is not self-blame. It is not taking responsibility for everything. It is owning what is yours. Full stop. You can say this in a way that says, my tone just got sharp. Or, I moved into fixing instead of listening. Or, I just shut down instead of telling you that I really needed a pause in that moment. Or, hey, listen, I kept pushing when I very well could tell you were overwhelmed. That is owning your part, but not erasing theirs. And what does ownership do? Ownership creates safety. The lack thereof creates danger, psychological danger. But over responsibility, what does that create? It creates warped perception. In other words, distortion. And when it comes to relationships and repairs, you do not want distortion. You want honest thought. You want truth. You want clarity. So after step number 2, what do? We move forward to step number 3. And this is where we make a clean return. A clean return might sound something along the lines of, hey, can we try that again? Let's try again. Or, what did you need from me in that moment? I don't think I got it. Or, hey, I want to understand what just happened inside of you. What happened for you in that moment? Or, hey, next time I'll ask before moving into advice. Per that problem solver that goes directly into fixing before listening. This is that moment where you notice next time you're going to ask if you want a shoulder or if you want a hammer. And lastly, I still care about this conversation and I care deeply. And I want to do it better. Saying any of those things, that does something so big in our nervous systems. The goal is not to perform a perfect apology. There is no such thing. The goal is to restore enough safety for that connection that you two had to become possible again. And I use my hands to kind of showcase that coming together, because visually we can understand it a little bit better when we recognize that we're all the way out here and we'll stay out here and out of connection unless we're willing to do those 3 steps. And that moves us a little bit closer back to that connecting point. So if you want healthier relationships, do not, my friends, only ask, how do we avoid conflict? Ask instead, how do we repair after that moment of disconnection? Because the strongest relationships, they're not the ones where nothing goes wrong. They are the ones where both people can come back to one another with honesty, humility, vulnerability, and care. And that's where it gets fun, because rupture ultimately does not have to be the end of safety as we know it. Sometimes rupture, when it's repaired well, I might add, becomes ultimately that space, that place in relationships where safety deepens. Because repair says, we can be imperfect here. We tell the truth here. And we can still come back to each other.
And if you want to dig a little bit deeper, you want to actually go a little bit further in the specific practical application in your world, join me and other evolvers at EVE Reflections, where we will dig into this together as a community, where you're not alone and where you are working on this with other evolvers. Click the link in the show notes. You'll get access to that. And I'm excited to continue this work together as we evolve together. Take care, everyone. Until next time, keep evolving.